Designing for the driverless future. Well, we were very lucky today to have representatives from UC San Diego showing us how it can be done in the process. So Colleen, why don't you tell us what exactly did we do today?
We did a bit of a participatory design process. So the lab that we come from is a very human-centered design lab, and so we were trying to give the group some experience in what the human-centered design process might look like. And so in this case, we decided to use something that we call journey maps, which we use in interviews, and we use it amongst ourselves and stuff. And it's a really nice way to kind of generate some really rich data around mobility and a way for a way to understand how people experience mobility and transit in their lives. How does it fit into their lives? And so that's what we were doing today.
I want to talk about the process in a moment, but first, you guys all bring a different background to make this work. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I'm cognitive science. I'm an early graduate from the University of California, San Diego. I have a little bit of mechanical engineering in my background as well, and aviation research. I did aviation flight deck design for a while and then transitioned to automobiles. But it's my view, and I think the view of everybody in the design lab and all the people that we work with, that having a really good multidisciplinary team is what makes for really good design. So that's why we're together.
I'm Deborah Forster. I'm a social scientist. I'm a cognitive scientist. I studied biology. I actually studied baboons in Kenya, and I was always interested in social complexity and distributed cognition. And when you do it with non-human animals that don't have language and don't have material culture and don't necessarily collaborate, you learn to look for these very rich social interactions that generate a lot. So when I moved now to work with humans that could talk and could draw and could bring on their own experience, then it's just a treasure trove. And actually the idea of a day in a life came for how we do activity cycles when we watch baboons in the savannah. We want to know what they do all day, and we want to know their budget. So what I love about it is that I like the idea that you go deep into yourself and you bring yourself to what's going on. You're not a passive audience that's listening to a lecture. And in that, because you have other people and because it's so rich, you can't not have an interesting experience. And this idea of changing perspective and doing the overlay on top of it was really cool, inspired by Kay Holmes and by some of my work that I did when I taught in the School of Architecture, where they always used tracing paper to bring out annotations. Combine that with wanting to get them all the way from having this personal experience to having something to say about design, or even the things that they care about, was kind of the motivation for me.
Yeah, and it was all abilities is what I gathered from it. And Stephanie, that you're talking about design, right?
Yeah. So I'm a sixth-year PhD student in the visual arts. Oh, please. The years will just keep on going. At UC San Diego. And my practice is both as a creative producer and storyteller. And I'm really interested in design futures, and so thinking about what's possible and probable in the future, but using kind of the future to work backwards from like, what do we want to see in the future, and then let's design for the futures that we want to see. And so that's everything from thinking about business planning, a lot about storytelling and marketing and branding, like how we're changing what we ask and expect out of companies and public services and all those kinds of things. So that's what gets me excited about mobility, and I love to travel also, so I think a big part of this is getting outside one's own particular experience and learning from other systems that operate in the world, like how does that function? So that's very instructive.
And we brought a lot of people to this group today. We were fortunate to be able to have a wide range of people from different disciplines, but also with different levels of mobility mismatch kinds of issues that they face on a daily basis. So in a sense, this was to share a little bit about our process, but in a lot of ways, we wanted to really learn from our audience or from our participants, actually.
I want to ask you what your learnings were, but first I want to ask, are you going to franchise this process? Because I could see as driverless goes out, this is going to be so important. So how do you leverage what you've done today for other groups?
Already we were approached by a number of people who said they wanted they wanted to use it in their work and to collaborate with us. We think the more things are open source and available to, and they're very easy. You need a piece of paper and some parching parchment or tracing
and
paper.
It's just it's just one of the many tools that we use, right? So we wouldn't. It's not something that I think about franchising.
Oh, no. Plus, we borrow from other people all the time, right? So that's important. Mm-hmm. The other thing about it is that the need to be experiential, I think, is the key. And it's not just that you can just go and run this over with other people and just give them instructions or something like that. So I think the more we have an opportunity to model that, also in the way we behave and the way we interact and the way we engage the audience, the more it's possible to use it anywhere, right? Yeah.
So then what did you guys learn from today?
To me, I think one of the interesting things was that even though they engaged in such detail of their life and then such detail of a different perspective with other mobility mismatches, what rose to the surface and what they were really able to organize was some really deep issues like trust, like uncertainty and accessibility, and like social stuff. And that a group can come together and actually start to talk about some things that may be considered abstract, but actually come out with some concrete ideas. I think that's where the richness comes from. If we just came and had strangers say, okay, you're going to talk about trust, you're going to talk about social, you wouldn't get that richness, but they've already drawn out a day, so they have a lot of juice to pull out.
Yeah, I was really struck by one of the people in this group over here, where he was really surprised after we did their journey map, so a day in his life, and then he overlaid it with a journey map of what it would be like for his friend to go through his day. And after he drew both of them, he just kind of sat there and he looked at it and he's all like, wow, I look at my journey map and it's pretty straightforward, right? There's not a whole lot going on. I do this, I do that, and then I finish up. But my friends, when you look at it, it's chaos. There's just so much going on and so many interruptions and all these things. And I think that kind of light bulb insight is really interesting. And sometimes it's not even necessarily from the stuff that you write on the paper, but it could be just even looking at the image of, this image of my simple circle and the chaotic journey map. So those moments are really nice for me.
And Anil kind of describing his life as a blind person. And I'm getting anxious the more and more he's describing that he has to go here and he has to go there and it's in a strange place. And then he's doing it very, very blasé. So this idea that with familiarity and with mastery, there comes kind of the comfort and that. And how do we allow people to become familiar quicker or do things that they can explore so they can come to a strange place. And
that is not something I thought about before. I don't know about you guys.
No, well, I was going to add to this that a woman in our group, Evelyn, who's an older lady who, she's independent but needs some help at some moments. And she said, well, I think that people limit themselves. And that to me was really insightful because there is all this uncertainty of even like on any journey or route where you're going and how all the elements that could come in. But the idea that like, you wouldn't even be able to explore because the fear of like not knowing, you could really get stuck in a situation, and how even one instance of overcoming or coming to terms with that situation can really open up a lot of new possibilities for mobility and access was really cool.
And I have to say, this woman who said, she started her thing by saying, this, for me, it's age and cost. I'm older and I'm poorer. And I thought, okay, now we're going to hear this like sob story. And then she goes, I go here and I meet these people, and I go by bus and I meet international people, and I go to the library and I have lunch with the librarian. And her day was like full. And then her perspective was at a friend of hers who has a private car. And it seems like it was very boring and very insulated, right? So to see her kind of pop up was like, that's a nice gem.
Excellent. Well, you guys showed me why UCSD is number one in cognitive science, so thank you very much for your time.
Can I turn around and say, what drew you to go from behind the camera to want to
well, Dr. Kornhauser, of course. I mean, he asked me to do this, and it was very timely because we're doing some stuff in San Jose, so I'm going to recommend that we do this kind of thing as we get out in the neighborhoods. And Dr. Kornhauser, we're having this conversation this morning, but what's going to kill the driverless is if you have the NIMBYs to driverless, right? And that'll happen if people don't understand it, aren't part of the process. So.
And if industry doesn't act responsibly, too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So back to that trust.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.